Many market factors that one needs to keep in mind. So let's delve into those right now. You can call in on 0861 987 000 if you have in the past purchased to let and gone through that process. What were some of your experiences? Let us know. Witness, it's good to have you here.
Thank you, Pabi. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so you know when you have these conversations around at the braai or whatever, people say, "Oh, no, just buy a property and rent it out; it'll pay for itself." Is it that simple?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And the reason I say, I'll start with the no. The reason why a lot of people get bent is because of these price stand conversations that they have. You know, before you get into any form of investment, you must understand how serious investing is. Buying a property is literally you taking your hard-earned money, be it you buying it cash or you're going to be paying every month, and putting it in an asset. And without determining whether or not that asset is going to be making some form of cash flow for you or later give you some capital gains, then it's going to be a useless investment. And then yes, because there are opportunities in the property market that people can take advantage of. When we think of buy to let, we're not necessarily only thinking about buying a flat or a house or an apartment and putting it on the market. There are different kinds of properties that one can diversify within the property industry and look at for them to be able to make money.
Very comprehensive yes and no. And I'd like to delve into that. Help us be a little bit more creative, because I think a lot of people just immediately think an apartment that you can let out.
Yeah.
I know student accommodation has become top of mind for a lot of people as well over the last few years. Yes. What else is out there?
Well, there are a lot of properties that are available. If you look at some of the areas where we are buying apartments now, some of the apartments are going for like $1 million plus, almost 2 million. And when you look at the rentals that one would be receiving from those apartments is less than what one is paying for the bond and all the extra costs. However, for that same amount of money, there's a building in Terrefontaine that can give you like 5, 6 tenants and you'll have much more cash flow than having bought an apartment for the same exact amount of money, right? So it all goes back to how one looks at it. However, there are people who might be listening that say, but I've already bought the apartment and I've got a tenant living there. Give him a notice and find ways to put that apartment on AirBNB for you to start making money every single day rather than at the end of the month. And that obviously will require you to have some sort of hospitality skills, right? So with every property that one invests in, they have to understand that it is a business and they have to look at it as a business. Unless one is buying that property to use it as some form of retirement 20 years from now, because that's slightly different. When they are receiving that rental income on a monthly basis, they'll just be paying the bond, which sometimes they will have to top up.
Yes.
And that we're talking about people now that are not sophisticated investors. It's people that are saying, I just want to buy a property and then I want to either sell it after 20 years or I want to refinance or I want to take some money from that property and take my child to school. That's slightly different. But if you want to come in with the mindset of being an investor has to have cash flow and you can't just buy for the sake of buying. The passive income has to be there, and it's there because you've bought a property and you're getting an income that's higher than the costs on that particular property.
Okay, so if you have a property and you're topping it up and you've thought about it and now you're mentioning this Terrefontaine building that you can have however many tenants, or maybe the idea of an Airbnb, I mean, what are some of the things to think about? Should you just try and sell in this economy? Should you transition? Should you have a plan about transitioning from one to another?
I think the most important thing right now is that if you've already gotten a bond for a property, before you decide to sell, look at ways in which you could start monetizing that property already. Because you might sell now and maybe you might not be able to afford the same property next year when you want to buy, right? Because interest rates are going up. Maybe when you bought the property, you could afford to get a bond. And now when you decide to sell, you find that you are no longer able to afford the same property that you had bought when you bought that one. So it's first important to look at what are the things that you can do to start making money from your existing portfolio. And once you've exhausted all avenues, then you could look at selling the property, but selling it only if you've eyed another one for the exact same amount of the bond that you could be able to afford immediately.
Because once that cash comes into your life, what have you seen happen?
So, I mean, you know how it is. If you're going to sell a property right now and you don't have a plan, the money will automatically bring in all sorts of plans that have got nothing to do with you building a portfolio.
Yeah.
You know, if money doesn't have a forced plan, it creates a plan of its own. And sometimes that plan could be consumption. All right. So, and one thing is that one always ought to understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
If you're going to be investing in property, why are you doing it? Right. And that why is going to be the reason why you build and scale your portfolio. Because if it's not strong enough, then you're not going to pay attention to the portfolio. You're not going to look at what kind of tenants you bring into that apartment or building. Right. So one has to definitely look at it as a business, because it is a business on its own.
Just let's talk a little bit about Airbnb.
Yeah.
Pros, cons, and things to think about.
So some of the things you have to look at on Airbnb is that you could be thinking, I'm gonna place the apartment for like 1,000 a day, only to find that that price point might be slightly expensive for your guests, and reducing that price point could also mean now you're not covering your bond and other costs. So it's very important to be price sensitive and price it in such a way that you're able to attract the right kind of market, but also making sure that your apartment is well furnished, like it's nice. You get an interior designer if you're not good at designing spaces for them to design that space for you, then that will justify the price that you're actually charging. And then also looking at the area where your apartment is. You see, if you haven't bought yet, you should shy away from buying apartments, if you're investing, of course, in areas that have got a lot of apartments. Like one goes into an estate or a complex that has got 1,000 apartments. Obviously, that means you have 1,000 people to compete with.
Right. When
it comes to that, you'll be competing for tenants, competing for Airbnb guests with over almost 1,000 people. But if you look at estates or complexes that have got 25 units, 50 units, less than 100 units, then you don't have a lot of people that you're competing with for tenants. And that gives you some sort of a demand, because I mean, you have to look at supply and demand. So the fact that there are less units available on the market, then it means you'll have slightly more people gunning for the units that are available.
This is assuming that most people in that complex have their homes up.
Yes, assuming that most people in the complex are living there as their primary homes.
Right.
And it's only a few people that are putting these apartments on
Very
Airbnb.
interesting. I also, have seen body corporates who don't allow for their units in their estates to be put up as Airbnbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are body corporates that say that they don't allow, but I can tell you now, people do it anyway. I've sat on several boards of trustees in estates. People will put, like for instance, you said that right now it's a tight market, right? The economy is not doing so well. So a lot of people are not doing well. What are you going to do? Are you going to force someone not to use their asset to make money?
To pay the levies, right,
and to pay all the costs associated with the property. What are you going to do? There's essentially no law that prohibits someone from renting out their apartment on short stay. It's my apartment. I can have as many visitors as I want.
So how do you handle the pushback from the body corporate?
Oh, it's a conversation that one has to have, which reminds me of the Blythe situation.
Sure.
Remember when people had bought apartments, they were utilizing them for Airbnb. Baldwin didn't win that case.
So Baldwin then came up and said, we don't permit this, we don't like it. Was it loud, rowdy parties on weekends?
Weekends. Yes, that obviously is wrong. But if I'm buying into a new development and the developer is going to be owning some of the units, it has to be declared up front when I buy that apartment that this is not allowed, this is allowed. So a lot of people, when they bought there, they bought under the presumption or assumption that they would be able to use those apartments for Airbnb. So there are certain loopholes that one can challenge, even in conversating with body corporates. You must remember one thing: body corporates are people. It's not just a system somewhere. It's someone that you can sit down with and have a conversation with, and even have a heart-to-heart and say, listen, I can't afford. I won't be able to pay the levies if I don't do this and make some extra cash. And sometimes you don't necessarily have to be renting out the same apartment. Now with Airbnb, it allows you even to rent out a space as small as a spare bedroom. So you can be able to start making money while living in an apartment. So the fact that there are people coming in and out, you live there. No one is going to ask you, Pabi, why do you have so many visitors? It's none of anyone's business. So people have to look at those kind of loopholes in order for them to help themselves, protect their assets, and also grow what they have.
That's very, very interesting. You're going to stick around with us after the news?
Yes.
All right. You can call in on 0861987000 if you have questions around property and putting your property up as a property to let in South Africa. It can be a very lucrative investment, but it does require careful research and careful consideration of a lot of factors. And here to talk to us about some of those factors and to answer some of our questions, witness Mdaka is an investment, a property investor, and you can call in on 0861987000. It's 2 o'clock.